I gave my whole life to my family, thinking love meant sacrifice. I worked double shifts to help pay for my brother's college, took care of our sick mother for 3 years without a single day off, and always put everyone else's needs before my own. But at my own mother's funeral, standing in front of everyone I'd ever loved, my brother looked me in the eye and called me a thief, a manipulator, and a liar. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. My name is Maya, and for 52 years, I believed that being a good daughter meant saying yes to everything and no to nothing when it came to my family. I was 8 years old when I first learned that love meant giving up what I wanted. It was Christmas morning, and I had been saving my allowance for months to buy myself a beautiful red bicycle I'd seen in the store window. I had $23.50 hidden in a jar under my bed, enough for the down payment. But that morning, my little brother Marcus came running into my room, tears streaming down his face. His bicycle, the one he'd gotten the year before, had been stolen from our front yard. "Maya," my mother said, appearing in my doorway with that tired look she always wore, "you know how much that bike meant to Marcus. Maybe you could help him get a new one. You're such a generous girl." I looked at my jar of saved coins, then at Marcus's hopeful face, then back at my mother. The red bicycle in the store window suddenly seemed selfish, unnecessary. What kind of sister would I be if I put my own wants above my brother's needs? I handed over every penny I had saved. Marcus got his new bike that week. I told everyone I had decided I didn't really want one anyway, and everyone praised me for being such a thoughtful, selfless big sister. That was the first time I learned that my value in the family came from what I could give, not from who I was. 20 years later, when Marcus called me from college, crying because he couldn't afford his textbooks, I didn't hesitate to send him $300 from my emergency fund. When he needed help with his apartment deposit, I took on extra shifts at the hospital, where I worked as a nurse. When he wanted to propose to Linda but couldn't afford a ring, I quietly took out a small loan to help him. "You're amazing, Maya," he would say. "I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the best sister in the world." I lived for those words. They made all the sacrifice worth it. Our parents had always favored Marcus. He was the baby, the boy, the one with big dreams who was going to make something of himself. I was just Maya, steady and reliable, the one who would always be there to clean up the messes and take care of everyone else. When I was 35 and finally saved enough to put a down payment on a small house, Marcus called with news that he and Linda were expecting their first baby. They were struggling financially, he said. Could I possibly help them with some medical bills? I used my house down payment to help them instead. I told myself I could always save up again. Family comes first. When I was 42 and had finally scraped together another down payment, this time it was Dad who needed help. He'd had a heart attack and the medical bills were overwhelming. Mom was beside herself with worry about losing their house. "Maya always helps," I heard Mom tell a neighbor on the phone. "She's such a good daughter. She never thinks about herself." So I didn't. I gave them my house fund and moved back into my childhood bedroom to help take care of Dad while he recovered. I told myself this was what love looked like, putting others first, being needed, being the one everyone could count on. But if I'm being honest, there was a part of me that was starting to feel invisible. At family gatherings, all the conversation centered around Marcus's job, Marcus's kids, Marcus's latest achievements. When people asked about me, the response was always the same. "Oh, Maya's doing great. Still nursing, still single, still taking care of everyone. Still single." That phrase always stung a little. I'd had relationships over the years, but they never seemed to work out. It's hard to build a life with someone when your family always comes first, when every date might be interrupted by a crisis that only you can solve, when your savings account is always empty because someone else needed the money more. "You're married to this family," my friend Janet used to joke, but it didn't feel funny anymore. Everything changed 3 years ago when Mom started showing signs of dementia. It started small, forgetting where she put her keys, calling me by my aunt's name sometimes, getting confused about what day it was. But it progressed quickly. Within 6 months, she couldn't be left alone safely. Marcus lived in California now with his family. He had a big job at a tech company, a beautiful house in the suburbs, and 3 kids involved in every activity imaginable. When I called to discuss Mom's condition, he was sympathetic but clear. "Maya, you know I wish I could help, but we're just so far away. And with the kids' schedules, you know how it is. Besides, you're so good with Mom, you always have been. She responds better to you anyway. so I became Mom's full-time caregiver. I reduced my hours at the hospital to part-time, which meant half the income but twice the stress. Every day was a new challenge, making sure Mom took her medications, keeping her safe when her confusion made her wander, dealing with the heartbreak of watching the woman who raised me slowly disappear. Some days she knew me. We would sit together and look through photo albums, and she would tell me stories about when I was little, about how proud she was of the woman I'd become. Other days, she thought I was a stranger and would become frightened and agitated. Those were the hardest days, being screamed at by the person you love most, being accused of things you'd never do, having to stay calm and patient when your heart was breaking. Marcus would call every few weeks to check in. The conversations always followed the same pattern. "How's Mom doing? She had a bad week. The doctor thinks we need to adjust her medications again. And she fell on Tuesday. I've been thinking we might need to make some changes to the house to make it safer." "That sounds expensive. Marcus, I think we need to talk about getting some help. I can't do this alone anymore. I'm exhausted, and I'm not sure I'm giving her the best care." "Well, what about that nice daycare center you mentioned? Maybe she could go there a few days a week." "That costs $800 a month, Marcus. On my part-time salary, I can barely keep up with her medical expenses as it is." There would be a pause. Then, "I wish I could help financially, Maya, but things are really tight right now. The kids' activities, the mortgage, you know how it is. But you're doing such a good job. Mom is lucky to have you." And that would be the end of the conversation. No offer to visit, no offer to help, no acknowledgement that I was drowning. I started to feel resentful, which made me feel guilty. Good daughters don't resent caring for their sick mothers. Good sisters don't keep track of who's sacrificing what. But I couldn't help wondering what would happen if I was the one who got sick. Who would drop everything to take care of me? The answer, I was afraid, was nobody. But I pushed those thoughts away and kept going, day after day, because that's what I'd always done. That's who I was, Maya, the caregiver, the one who handles everything, the one who never complains. I had no idea that everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in it, and about the last 3 years of sacrifice, was about to come crashing down around me. And it would start with a phone call I should have never answered. It was a Tuesday evening in March, when everything I thought I knew about my family started to unravel. Mom had been having one of her bad days. She'd forgotten who I was that morning and spent most of the afternoon asking for her mother, who had died 20 years ago. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and honestly questioning whether I was strong enough to keep doing this alone. I had just gotten Mom settled in bed and was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of medical bills I couldn't afford, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer anyway. "Hello, is this Maya Johnson?" "Yes, this is Maya. Hi, Maya. My name is Carol Henderson. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services in Los Angeles County." My heart immediately started racing. Adult Protective Services. Why would they be calling me? "I'm calling because we received a report of concern about an elderly woman named Ruth Johnson." "I believe she's your mother." "Yes, she's my mother." "What kind of report? Is everything okay?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when Carol spoke again, her voice was gentle but serious. "Maya, someone called in a report claiming that your mother may be the victim of financial abuse and neglect. The caller stated that you've been isolating her from family members and may be misusing her finances for personal gain." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "I'm sorry, what? Who would say that?" "I can't reveal the identity of the person who made the report, but I do need to ask you some questions and possibly schedule a home visit to assess your mother's well-being." For the next 20 minutes, I answered questions about Mom's care, her finances, her medical treatment, and our living situation. I explained about her dementia, about how I'd reduced my work hours to care for her, about the medical bills and the constant doctor appointments. Carol listened patiently and seemed to believe me, but I could tell she was taking notes of everything I said. "Maya, based on what you're telling me, it sounds like you're doing your best in a very difficult situation. However, I do need to follow up on this report. Would it be possible for me to come by this week to meet with you and your mother?" "Of course," I said, though my hands were shaking, "but I don't understand who would make a report like this. My brother lives in California. He's really the only other family member involved in Mom's care." Another pause. "Actually, Maya, the report came from California." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen in complete shock. Someone in California had called Adult Protective Services to report me for abusing my mother. The only person I knew in California was Marcus. But that was impossible. Marcus knew how hard I was working to take care of Mom. He knew I'd given up my career, my savings, my entire life to be her caregiver. He wouldn't, he couldn't, could he? I tried calling him immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Marcus, it's Maya. Something really strange happened tonight and I need to talk to you. Please call me back as soon as you get this. He didn't call back that night, or the next day. When he finally returned my call 2 days later, his voice sounded different, distant, almost cold. Hey Maya, sorry I missed your calls. Things have been crazy at work. Marcus, I got a call from Adult Protective Services. Someone reported me for neglecting Mom and stealing her money. They said the call came from California. Really? That's weird. I wonder who would do that. Something about his tone made my stomach drop. There was no shock in his voice, no outrage on my behalf, no immediate jumping to my defense like I would have expected from my brother. Marcus, you didn't. I mean, you wouldn't have called them, would you? A long pause. Maya, I've been worried about Mom. Every time we talk, you sound overwhelmed and stressed. And some of the things you've told me about her condition. I just wondered if maybe she needs more professional care than you can provide. So you called APS on me. Without talking to me first, without even visiting to see how she's actually doing. I didn't call anyone, Maya. But maybe someone else in the family is concerned too. Have you talked to Aunt Patricia lately? Or Cousin Jennifer? That was strange. I hadn't spoken to any of our extended family in months, mainly because I was too busy with Mom's care to maintain those relationships. But Marcus was right, maybe one of them had called. Look, Marcus continued, maybe this is actually a good thing. Maybe APS can help connect you with some resources, some assistance programs you didn't know about. But something still felt off about the whole conversation. Marcus was being supportive, but in a careful, measured way that didn't feel natural, and he never directly denied making the report. 2 days later, Carol from APS came to visit. She was a kind woman in her 50s who immediately put Mom at ease. She spent over an hour with us, observing how Mom and I interacted, looking at Mom's medications and medical records, and reviewing the household finances. Maya, she said as she was preparing to leave, I can see that you're providing excellent care for your mother under very challenging circumstances. There's clearly no evidence of abuse or neglect here. However, I am concerned about caregiver burnout. Have you looked into any respite care services? I've looked into them, but they're expensive and most of them have waiting lists. Carol left me with a folder full of resources and assured me that the case would be closed. But as relieved as I was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong with the whole situation. That feeling only got stronger over the next few weeks. First, I noticed that Marcus's calls became even less frequent. When he did call, the conversations were brief and felt strangely formal. He would ask about Mom's health in general terms, but didn't seem interested in the details that usually concerned him. Then I started getting strange calls from other family members, people I hadn't heard from in months, or even years. Aunt Patricia called on a Thursday afternoon. Maya, honey, how are you holding up? I've been hearing some concerning things about your mother's situation. What kind of concerning things? Well, I don't want to spread gossip, but someone mentioned that Ruth might not be getting the care she needs. And there were questions about her finances. I felt my face get hot. Aunt Patricia, who told you that? Mom is getting excellent care. I've given up everything to take care of her. Oh, I'm sure you have, dear. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. Well, maybe it would be good for some of us to visit more often. To help out, you know. But she never offered to visit. And when I suggested she could come any weekend, she always had an excuse. The same thing happened with my cousin Jennifer, and then with Mom's old neighbor Mrs. Thompson. All of these people who had barely been in touch for years were suddenly calling with concerns about Mom's care and vague suggestions that maybe she needed different care. It felt like there was a whisper campaign happening, but I couldn't figure out who was behind it or why. The answer came 3 weeks later, in the most unexpected way. I was helping Mom get ready for bed when her phone rang. She had been having a particularly good day, she'd remembered my name all day, and had even helped me fold some laundry. When the phone rang, she moved to answer it before I could intervene. Hello. I could hear a man's voice on the other end, but couldn't make out the words. Oh, Marcus! Mom's face lit up. How wonderful to hear from you. I was relieved. It had been almost 3 weeks since Marcus had called, and I had been starting to worry that something was wrong. But then I heard Mom's side of the conversation, and my blood ran cold. What? No, honey, Maya takes very good care of me. What do you mean, money problems? I don't understand. No, she doesn't keep me from talking to people. Marcus, why are you asking me these things? Mom's expression changed from joy to confusion to distress. I don't know what you want me to say. She's a good daughter. No, I'm not afraid of her. I gently took the phone from Mom's trembling hands. Marcus, what's going on? You're upsetting her. I was just checking on Mom, Maya, making sure she's okay. You were interrogating her. I could hear it in her voice. What's this about money problems and being afraid of me? I think you're overreacting. I was just asking how she's doing. But I wasn't overreacting, and we both knew it. Something was happening here, something deliberate and calculated. And for the first time in my life, I was starting to suspect that my little brother, the person I had sacrificed everything for, the person I trusted most in the world, might not be the person I thought he was. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to start paying closer attention to the things I had always taken for granted. I was going to start asking questions I had never thought to ask. And I was going to find out the truth about what Marcus was really up to, even if I didn't like what I discovered, because something told me that the phone call from Adult Protective Services was just the beginning. The next few days felt like I was living in a different reality. Every conversation I'd had with Marcus over the past year started replaying in my mind, and details that had seemed normal at the time suddenly felt suspicious. I decided to start with the most obvious question. If Marcus hadn't called Adult Protective Services, who had? I called Carol Henderson back and asked if there was any way she could give me more information about the report without violating confidentiality. Maya, I understand your concern, she said. I can tell you that the caller claimed to be a concerned family member who lived out of state. They said they had been trying to reach your mother, but that you were preventing family members from having contact with her. That's not true. Mom's phone is right beside her bed. Anyone can call her anytime. The caller also claimed that your mother had told them she was afraid of you and that you were taking money from her accounts without permission. I felt sick. Carol, my mother has dementia. Some days she doesn't even know who I am, and I've never taken a penny from her that wasn't for her care. Every transaction is documented. I believe you, Maya. That's why I closed the case. But I have to ask, do you have any idea who might make false accusations like this? I had an idea, but I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. That afternoon, while Mom was napping, I did something I'd never done before. I went through her phone to check her call history. What I found made my hands shake. Over the past 3 months, Marcus had been calling Mom regularly, sometimes daily, but never when I was around. The calls were always during the times when I was at work or running errands. And they were long calls, some lasting over an hour. But here's what really disturbed me. Marcus had also been calling Mom's doctor's office, her bank, and even her insurance company. When I called these places to ask about it, I learned that he had identified himself as her primary caregiver and had been asking detailed questions about her medical condition, her financial accounts, and her insurance policies. I told the bank representative, I'm her primary caregiver. I'm the one who lives with her and manages her daily care. According to our records, Mr. Marcus Johnson called last month to update his contact information as the primary emergency contact and to request copies of all account statements be mailed to his address in California. My stomach dropped. He did what? He also inquired about the process for obtaining power of attorney and asked about any joint accounts or beneficiary designations on the account. I immediately went to the bank in person. What I discovered there shook me to my core. Marcus had indeed changed himself to the primary contact on Mom's accounts. He had requested and received copies of all her financial statements for the past 2 years. And he had been asking detailed questions about her assets, including the value of the house and any savings or investment accounts. But the worst part was what the bank manager told me next. Ms. Johnson, your brother also inquired about your mother's mental capacity and whether the bank had any concerns about her ability to make financial decisions independently. What did you tell him? We explained that those determinations would need to be made by medical professionals, but that we do have protocols for when we suspect financial elder abuse. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed was horrifying. Marcus wasn't just checking on Mom's well-being, he was building a case against me. That evening, I sat Mom down for a conversation that broke my heart. Mom, I need to ask you about some phone calls you've been getting from Marcus. Her face brightened. Oh, Marcus calls me all the time now. It's so nice to hear from him more often. What do you two talk about? Oh, you know, this and that. He asks about my health, about my money. He seems very concerned about me. What kind of questions does he ask about your money? Mom looked confused. He asks if I'm worried about having enough money, if anyone is helping me with my accounts. Sometimes I get confused about what he's asking. The questions seem so strange. Mom, has Marcus ever asked you if you're afraid of me? Or if I'm taking your money? Her face crumpled. Maya, why would you ask me that? Of course I'm not afraid of you, you take such good care of me. But then she paused, and I could see her struggling to remember something. Although Marcus did ask me some questions that upset me. He wanted to know if you ever got angry with me, if you ever yelled at me or made me do things I didn't want to do. My heart was pounding. What did you tell him? I told him you're a wonderful daughter, and that I don't know what I'd do without you. But Maya, why would he ask me things like that? It made me feel scared, like I was supposed to be afraid of something. That night, after Mom went to bed, I made a decision that felt like crossing a line I could never uncross. I needed to know exactly what Marcus was doing, so I was going to start documenting everything. I created a notebook where I recorded every phone call, every strange question from relatives, every odd comment Mom made about her conversations with Marcus. I also started saving copies of all Mom's medical records, financial statements, and any correspondence with her doctors or insurance companies. What I discovered over the next 2 weeks was systematic and deliberate. Marcus had been calling Mom's doctor's office monthly, expressing concerns about my ability to manage Mom's care. He had suggested that Mom might need to be evaluated for nursing home placement and had asked about the process for obtaining guardianship if a family member was deemed unfit to provide care. He had also been in contact with several of our relatives, telling them that he was worried about Mom's situation and asking them to call and check on her to see if she seemed afraid or confused. I'm just trying to look out for Mom from across the country, he had told Aunt Patricia. Maya seems overwhelmed, and I'm worried she might not be making the best decisions for Mom's care. When I called Aunt Patricia to confront her about this, she was defensive. Maya, Marcus is just concerned about his mother. He's told me how stressed you sound when he calls, how you've had to cut back your work hours, how you're struggling financially. He's worried that maybe Ruth needs professional care that you can't provide. Aunt Patricia, has Marcus visited Mom even once in the past 3 years? Has he offered to help with her care in any way other than making phone calls questioning my ability to care for her? There was a long pause. Well, no, but he lives so far away, and he has his own family to think about. So he's never actually seen Mom's condition firsthand, but he's convinced all of you that I'm an unfit caregiver. That conversation opened my eyes to something even more disturbing. Marcus had been telling people that he was the one making the responsible, difficult decisions about Mom's care, while I was being emotional and stubborn about accepting help. He had painted himself as the rational, concerned son who was trying to do right by his mother, while painting me as the overly attached daughter who was keeping Mom from getting proper care, because I couldn't accept that I wasn't capable of caring for her alone. And people were believing him. The final piece of the puzzle came when I was helping Mom organize some papers in her bedroom. Hidden in the back of her desk drawer, I found something that made my blood run cold, a stack of legal documents that I had never seen before. They were preliminary guardianship papers, printed from the internet, along with medical power of attorney forms, and several brochures for assisted living facilities in California. At the bottom of the stack was a handwritten note in Marcus's handwriting. Documentation needed, medical records showing decline, financial records showing mismanagement, statements from family members expressing concern. My hands were shaking as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just casual concern or family interference. This was a calculated plan to have me removed as Mom's caregiver and to move her to California, where Marcus could control her care and her assets. But why? Marcus had a good job, a beautiful house, a successful life. Why would he go to such elaborate lengths to undermine me and take control of Mom? The answer came to me as I sat there staring at those papers. It wasn't about Mom's care at all. It was about Mom's money. Our childhood home was now worth over $300,000. Mom had a pension, Social Security, and about $80,000 in savings. To me, living paycheck to paycheck as a part-time nurse, that seemed like a modest amount. But to someone planning for their children's college funds and their own retirement, it probably looked like a substantial inheritance. An inheritance that was currently being wasted on Mom's medical care while she lived with her daughter, instead of in a more affordable care facility. I thought about all the times Marcus had subtly suggested that Mom might be happier in a place with other seniors, all the comments about how I was sacrificing too much and should think about my own future. I had thought he was concerned about my well-being. Now I realized he was concerned about the inheritance disappearing while I provided expensive one-on-one care at home. As I sat there in Mom's bedroom, holding the evidence of my brother's betrayal, I felt something I had never felt before in my relationship with my family: rage. Not the quick flash of anger that comes and goes, but a deep, burning rage at the injustice of it all. I had given up my career, my savings, my chance at my own family, my entire life to care for our mother. And my brother, the person I had supported and sacrificed for my entire life, was working systematically to destroy my reputation and take control of the one thing I had left: my role as Mom's daughter and caregiver. But I also felt something else: determination. Marcus thought he could manipulate me the same way he had always manipulated me, by making me feel guilty, by making me doubt myself, by convincing everyone around me that he knew what was best. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't going to just accept it and try to keep the peace. This time, I was going to fight back. I just had no idea how much I was going to need that fighting spirit in the weeks to come. The morning after I found those legal documents, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't going to put my family's comfort ahead of what was right. My first call was to Mom's doctor, Dr. Patricia Williams, who had been treating her for over a decade. "Dr. Williams, I need to discuss some concerns about my mother's care and some unauthorized inquiries that have been made to your office." "Of course, Maya. What's troubling you?" I explained about Marcus's calls, the APS report, and his pattern of questioning Mom's mental state and my caregiving abilities without ever visiting or witnessing Mom's condition firsthand. Dr. Williams was quiet for a long moment. "Maya, I want you to know that your brother has indeed contacted our office multiple times. He's asked detailed questions about your mother's prognosis and has specifically inquired about her decision-making capacity." "What did you tell him?" "I told him that I could only discuss medical information with your mother's designated healthcare proxy, which according to our records is you. However, I will say that he seemed very focused on documenting what he called your mother's decline and your ability to provide adequate care. Dr. Williams, in your professional opinion, is my mother receiving appropriate care at home?" "Maya, your mother's condition has been remarkably stable over the past year. Her confusion comes and goes, as is typical with her type of dementia, but she's physically healthy, well nourished, and clearly comfortable in her home environment. In my 25 years of practice, I can tell you that the quality of care she's receiving at home far exceeds what most facilities could provide." I felt a rush of relief mixed with validation. "Would you be willing to document that assessment?" "Absolutely. And Maya, I think you should know that your brother specifically asked me whether I thought your mother might be better served in a residential facility. When I told him that wasn't medically necessary, he seemed disappointed rather than relieved. That afternoon, I took another step I'd never taken before. I consulted with an elder law attorney. Sarah Martinez had been recommended by Dr. Williams, and she specialized in protecting elderly clients from financial abuse and inappropriate guardianship proceedings. "Maya," she said after I explained the situation, "what you're describing sounds like a classic case of someone positioning themselves to challenge guardianship. The pattern of creating documentation, questioning the current caregiver's competence, and involving outside agencies is textbook. But my brother lives across the country. Could he really get guardianship? If he could prove that your mother needs guardianship, and that you're unfit to serve as guardian, yes. Distance wouldn't necessarily prevent him from obtaining guardianship, especially if he argued that your mother would be better served in a facility near him." My stomach dropped. "What can I do?" "Several things. First, make sure all of your mother's legal documents are in order and properly executed. Second, document everything, every conversation, every incident, every example of the excellent care you're providing. Third, consider having your mother's mental capacity formally evaluated by an independent professional. An evaluation. A neuropsychological evaluation that documents her current cognitive abilities and confirms that while she has dementia, she's not incompetent to make basic decisions about her care. It would also assess whether she's being coerced or manipulated by anyone." I left that meeting feeling empowered for the first time in months. I had a plan, and I had professional support, but the most important support came from an unexpected source. I was in the front yard that evening, helping Mom water her flower garden, one of the few activities that still brought her consistent joy, when our neighbor Mrs. Eleanor Washington came over to chat. Mrs. Washington was 78 years old, a retired high school principal who had lived next door for over 30 years. She was sharp as a tack, elegant in the way that women of her generation could be, and had always been kind to Mom and me without being intrusive. "Maya," she said, "I hope you don't mind me saying, but you look like you've been carrying the weight of the world lately." Something about her gentle tone and the genuine concern in her eyes made me want to tell her everything. Maybe it was because I'd been carrying this burden alone for so long, or maybe it was because she was outside the family drama and could see things clearly. "Mrs. Washington, can I ask you something? In all the time you've known me and Mom, have you ever seen any signs that I was mistreating her or not taking good care of her?" She looked genuinely shocked. "Maya Johnson, what on earth would make you ask such a thing? You've been nothing but devoted to your mother. I've watched you sacrifice your own life to care for her, and I've seen how much she depends on you and trusts you." And then, for the first time in months, I broke down and told someone the whole truth. I told her about Marcus's campaign against me, about the APS call, about the legal documents I'd found, about the systematic way he was undermining me with family members and professionals. Mrs. Washington listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail I shared. "Maya," she said when I finished, "I need to tell you something. I've been watching this situation develop, and I've seen some things that troubled me." "What do you mean?" "I've noticed that your mother gets upset phone calls. I can hear her crying sometimes through the window, and I've seen her become agitated after these calls in a way she never is after spending time with you." I felt a chill. "You've noticed that?" "Honey, I've been a teacher and principal for 40 years. I know what emotional manipulation looks like, and I know what genuine care looks like. What you're providing for your mother is love and devotion. What she's experiencing from these phone calls is confusion and distress." Mrs. Washington paused and looked directly at me. "Maya, can I share something with you that might help?" "Of course. 20 years ago, my younger sister tried to have me declared incompetent so she could take control of my finances and force me to sell my house. She lived in another state and convinced half our family that I was becoming senile and that I needed help managing my affairs." I stared at her. "What happened?" "I learned that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the worst, if there's something in it for them. And I learned that you can't fight manipulation with kindness and understanding. You have to fight it with truth, documentation, and sometimes with legal action." "How did you stop her?" "I got an attorney, I documented everything, and most importantly, I stopped trying to preserve the relationship. I stopped caring more about keeping the peace than about protecting myself." Mrs. Washington reached over and took my hand. "Maya, you're going to have to make a choice. You can keep trying to be the good daughter who never makes waves, or you can protect yourself and your mother from someone who's using your love and loyalty against you. But he's my brother. He's the only family I have left besides Mom. Honey, family isn't just about blood. Family is about people who love you, support you, and want what's best for you. From what you've told me, your brother doesn't want what's best for you, he wants what's best for himself." That conversation changed something fundamental in how I thought about my situation. Mrs. Washington was right. I had been so focused on preserving my relationship with Marcus that I wasn't protecting Mom and myself from what he was actually doing. "Mrs. Washington, would you be willing to help me document some things, as a witness to Mom's condition and my care for her?" "Absolutely. And Maya, I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Some battles you have to fight by yourself, but you don't have to fight this one completely alone." Over the next week, Mrs. Washington helped me create a comprehensive record of Mom's daily routine, her mental and physical condition, and the quality of care she was receiving. As a former educator, she knew how to document things in a way that would be credible and detailed. She also helped me understand something crucial. I had been reacting to Marcus's moves instead of making my own strategic decisions. "Maya, you've been playing defense when you need to be playing offense," she told me as we sat in her kitchen, organizing my documentation. "Instead of just responding to his accusations, you need to take control of the narrative." "What do you mean?" "I mean you need to start making the phone calls. You need to contact your relatives and tell them your side of the story. You need to be proactive with your mother's doctors and financial institutions. You need to stop letting him control the conversation." She was right. For months, I had been trying to defend myself against accusations that I didn't even know were being made. I had been letting Marcus set the terms of every interaction. It was time to change that. The next morning, I made a series of phone calls that I should have made months earlier. I called Aunt Patricia first. Aunt Patricia, I need to have an honest conversation with you about what's been happening with Mom's care. Oh, Maya, I hope you're not upset about our last conversation. I was just concerned. I'm not upset, but I think you deserve to know the full story before you make any judgments about my ability to care for Mom. I spent 20 minutes explaining the reality of Mom's condition, the level of care she was receiving, and the fact that Marcus had never visited or offered any concrete help while systematically undermining my caregiving from across the country. Aunt Patricia, I want to invite you to come visit Mom anytime you'd like. I want you to see for yourself how she's doing and what her actual needs are. Because I think you'll find that the picture Marcus has painted for you isn't accurate. There was a long silence. Maya, I didn't realize Marcus hadn't been visiting. He made it sound like he was very involved in her care. He's involved in questioning her care and creating doubts about it. But he hasn't been involved in actually providing any care or support. I made similar calls to Jennifer and to several other family members. In each conversation, I invited them to visit, to see Mom's condition for themselves, and to judge my caregiving based on observation rather than speculation. By the end of the week, I had accomplished something I'd never done before. I had told my side of the story first, instead of just reacting to Marcus's version of events. But I knew this was just the beginning. Marcus wasn't going to give up his campaign, just because I had started defending myself more effectively. In fact, based on everything I'd learned about manipulation and control, I suspected he was going to escalate. I just didn't realize how vicious that escalation was going to be, or how much it was going to test every ounce of strength I'd found within myself. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt ready for whatever was coming, because I wasn't fighting alone anymore, and I wasn't fighting just to keep the peace. I was fighting for the truth. I should have known that Marcus wouldn't take my newfound assertiveness quietly. I had disrupted his carefully constructed narrative, and people like him don't like losing control. The first sign that he was escalating came 3 days after my calls to the family. Mom's phone rang at 8 in the morning, unusually early for Marcus to call. Maya, Mom called from her bedroom. What's Marcus? And he sounds upset. I could hear his raised voice from across the room as I walked over to check on the conversation. Mom, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Marcus was saying, his tone more aggressive than I'd ever heard him use with her. What kind of questions, honey? Mom asked, already sounding anxious. Has Maya ever threatened you? Has she ever made you feel like you couldn't talk to me or other family members? Marcus, why would you ask me that? Maya has never threatened me. Mom, I've been hearing some very concerning things from other family members. They're worried that Maya might be keeping you isolated, and that you might be afraid to tell the truth about how she treats you. I could see Mom's face crumpling with confusion and distress. This wasn't the gentle, concerned questioning from before. This was aggressive interrogation designed to create fear and doubt. I took the phone from Mom's trembling hands. Marcus, that's enough. You're upsetting her with these questions. Maya, I need to talk to Mom without you interfering. This is exactly the kind of controlling behavior that people are concerned about. People? What people, Marcus? Because I've talked to Aunt Patricia and Jennifer and Mrs. Thompson, and they all seem to have gotten a very different impression of the situation after actually speaking with me. There was a pause, and when Marcus spoke again, his voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. Maya, we need to talk. I'm flying out there this weekend. My heart started racing. You're coming here? It's time I saw Mom's situation for myself. I'll be there Saturday. After he hung up, I sat with Mom and tried to calm her down. But she was more agitated than I'd seen her in months. Maya, why is Marcus asking me those scary questions? Why does he think I'm afraid of you? I don't understand what's happening. Mom, Marcus is having some problems understanding your situation. But you don't need to worry about it, okay? You're safe and you're getting good care, and that's all that matters. But I was worried, very worried. I called Mrs. Washington immediately. Eleanor, I said, using her first name for the first time since she'd given me permission. Marcus is coming this weekend. I think he's planning something. What kind of something? I don't know, but the way he was questioning Mom this morning, it felt like he was trying to create evidence of something that isn't happening, like he was trying to get her to say she's afraid of me. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Maya, I think you need to be prepared for the possibility that he's coming to take your mother away. What do you mean? If he's been building a case that you're an unfit caregiver, he might be coming to physically remove her from the home. Especially if he can create a scene or document what he claims is evidence of neglect or abuse. The thought had never occurred to me, but it made horrible sense. Can he do that legally? If he can convince authorities that she's in immediate danger, he might be able to get emergency intervention. And once she's removed from the home, it becomes much harder to get her back. That afternoon, I called Sarah Martinez, the elder law attorney. Sarah, I think my brother is coming to try to remove my mother from the home this weekend. What should I do? Don't panic. Second, document everything. Have witnesses present if possible. Third, make sure all of your mother's legal documents are easily accessible and that you have copies of everything showing your legal authority to make decisions for her. What if he tries to physically take her? Call 911 immediately. Don't try to physically prevent him, but make it clear that your mother is being removed against her will and without legal authority. I spent the next 2 days preparing for Marcus's visit like I was preparing for battle. Eleanor helped me organize all of Mom's medical records, financial documents, and legal papers. We created a timeline of Mom's care, including photos and detailed notes about her daily routine and her mental and physical condition. Eleanor also suggested something that made me uncomfortable, but that I knew was necessary. Maya, I think you should have someone here when Marcus arrives. A neutral witness who can observe the interactions and testify later if needed. Who would do that? I will. And I think we should ask Dr. Williams if she'd be willing to make a house call to evaluate your mother's condition while Marcus is here. Saturday morning came, and I felt like I was waiting for a hurricane to hit. Mom was having a good day mentally. She was alert and recognized me clearly, but she was anxious because she could sense my tension. Marcus arrived at 2 o'clock with a rental car and 2 suitcases, which seemed like a lot for a weekend visit. When I opened the door, the brother I saw wasn't the Marcus I had grown up with. This man looked cold, calculating, and determined. There was no warmth in his greeting, no genuine concern for Mom in his expression. Hello, Maya. Where's Mom? She's in the living room. Marcus, before you see her, I think we should talk. We can talk later, and I want to see my mother. He walked past me into the living room, and I followed, my heart pounding. Mom, Marcus said, his voice suddenly warm and concerned. How are you feeling? Mom's face lit up. Marcus, what a wonderful surprise. Maya didn't tell me you were coming. I wanted it to be a surprise, Mom. I've been so worried about you. For the next hour, I watched Marcus perform what I can only describe as an audit of Mom's life. He went through her medications, questioning every prescription. He examined the house, pointing out things that needed repair or cleaning. He asked Mom detailed questions about her daily routine, her meals, her medical appointments. But what disturbed me most was how he asked these questions in a way that implied problems that didn't exist. Mom, are you getting enough to eat? Maya, why does Mom look like she's lost weight? So Mom hadn't lost weight, Dr. Williams had noted that her weight was stable at her last appointment. Mom, you seem confused about your medications. Maya, how do we know Mom is taking the right pills at the right times? So Mom had a pill organizer system that worked perfectly, and I supervised all her medications. Mom, this house seems like it might be dangerous for someone with your condition. Are you worried about falling? The house had been safety modified with grab bars, non-slip mats, and better lighting. Every question was designed to plant seeds of doubt and create the impression of problems that needed to be solved by removing Mom from my care. The breaking point came when Dr. Williams arrived for the house call I had arranged. Marcus was immediately suspicious. Why is the doctor here? Did something happen to Mom? I asked Dr. Williams to come so she could evaluate Mom's condition while you're here. I thought you'd want to hear directly from her physician about how Mom is doing. Dr. Williams spent 30 minutes examining Mom, reviewing her medications, and asking about her daily activities and mental state. Her assessment was exactly what I expected. Mrs. Johnson is doing remarkably well for someone with her condition. She's physically healthy, her medications are well managed, and while she does have cognitive impairment, she's functioning well in her familiar environment with appropriate support. Marcus wasn't satisfied with that assessment. Doctor, don't you think my mother would benefit from professional care in a facility designed for people with dementia? That would be appropriate, if she needed more care than she's currently receiving. But she doesn't. The care she's getting at home is excellent. But what about Maya's ability to provide that care long term? Isn't she putting herself at risk by trying to manage this alone? Dr. Williams looked at Marcus carefully. Your sister has been providing exceptional care for your mother. If she ever feels that the situation is becoming unmanageable, I'm sure she'll let us know. But right now, your mother is thriving under her care. After Dr. Williams left, Marcus's mask finally came off completely. Maya, we need to talk privately. We went into the kitchen and Marcus closed the door. This situation isn't sustainable, he said bluntly. Mom needs professional care, and you need to get on with your own life. Marcus, you just heard the doctor say that Mom is doing well with the care she's getting. One doctor's opinion doesn't change the facts. You're overwhelmed, you're financially struggling, and Mom would be better served in a proper facility near you in California. Marcus's expression hardened. Yes, as a matter of fact, there are excellent facilities near my house where I could visit her regularly and make sure she's getting appropriate care. You haven't visited her once in 3 years, Marcus. Why would that change if she moved to California? Because I would have legal responsibility for her care and wouldn't have to worry about whether someone else is making good decisions on her behalf. And there it was, the truth he'd been dancing around for months. This wasn't about Mom's well-being. This was about control. Marcus, Mom doesn't want to move to California. She wants to stay in her own home with me. Maya, Mom has dementia. She's not capable of making rational decisions about her care anymore. The doctor just said she's functioning well and doesn't need institutionalization. The doctor said she's doing well now. But what happens when you can't handle it anymore? What happens when you have a breakdown from the stress? What happens when you can't afford to keep taking care of her? There was something in the way he said it that made my blood run cold. It wasn't concern, it was almost like a threat. What are you saying, Marcus? I'm saying that I've been documenting serious concerns about this situation for months. I have statements from family members who are worried about Mom's care. I have evidence that you're financially struggling and emotionally overwhelmed. If something happens to Mom because you're too proud to admit you can't handle this, it's going to be your fault. I stared at my brother, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Someone who was willing to tear apart his family to get what he wanted. Someone who had spent months systematically destroying my reputation and peace of mind to position himself to take control of our mother's life and assets. Get out? I said quietly. What? Get out of this house. Now, Maya, you're being irrational. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns people. Marcus, this is my home and my mother's home. You are not welcome here anymore. You can't keep me from seeing my mother. I'm not keeping you from seeing her. I'm asking you to leave because you didn't come here to visit Mom, you came here to build a case against me. And I won't have you upsetting her with your manipulative questions and implied threats. Marcus stood up, and for a moment, I thought he might refuse to leave. But then his expression changed to something that chilled me. Maya, you're making a big mistake. I was trying to handle this quietly, to give you a chance to make the right decision voluntarily. But if you want to do this the hard way, we can do it the hard way. After he left, I sat in my kitchen and cried harder than I had cried since Dad died. Not just from the stress and fear, but from the grief of losing my brother, or rather, of finally seeing who he really was. Eleanor came over as soon as she saw Marcus's rental car leave. How bad was it? She asked. Eleanor, I think he's going to try to have Mom taken away from me. And I'm not sure I can stop him. Maya, look at me. Eleanor took my hands in hers. You've done everything right. You have documentation, you have professional support, and you have the truth on your side. Sometimes that's enough. And if it's not, then we'll deal with whatever comes next. But Maya, you've already won the most important victory. You stopped letting him control you. Whatever happens now, you're fighting back. And that makes all the difference. I hope she was right. Because I had a feeling the real battle was just beginning. Marcus wasn't bluffing about doing things the hard way. 2 weeks after his visit, I received a certified letter that made my hands shake as I read it. It was a formal petition for emergency guardianship of my mother, filed in the county court by Marcus Johnson, claiming that Ruth Johnson was vulnerable and at risk due to inadequate care provided by an overwhelmed and financially unstable daughter. The petition painted a picture of me that was so distorted I barely recognized myself. According to Marcus's filing, I was an unemployed woman with a history of financial instability who had isolated our mother from family members and was providing substandard care that endangered her health and safety. He had attached evidence that made my stomach turn, statements from family members expressing concern about Mom's care, copies of Mom's medical bills showing the cost of her care, bank records showing my reduced income, and even a statement from Adult Protective Services about the investigation they had conducted. Everything was technically true but presented in the most damaging way possible. Yes, I had reduced my work hours to care for Mom. Yes, Mom's medical expenses were high because I was ensuring she got excellent care. Yes, APS had investigated, but they had found no evidence of abuse or neglect. But the way Marcus presented these facts, they looked like evidence of my incompetence and unfitness as a caregiver. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks away. I called Sarah Martinez immediately. "Sarah, they're trying to take my mother away from me." "Maya, take a deep breath. I've seen the petition, and while it looks scary, remember that Marcus has to prove his case. The burden of proof is on him to show that guardianship is necessary and that you're unfit. But what if he can prove it? What if the judge believes his version of things? That's why we prepared so thoroughly. We have Dr. Williams' assessment. We have your documentation of care. We have witness statements about your mother's condition and your dedication to her care. We're going to tell your story, not just respond to his accusations." But I was terrified. The thought of losing Mom, of having her taken away from everything familiar and placed in an institution while Marcus controlled every aspect of her life, made me feel physically sick. Eleanor found me crying at my kitchen table the next morning. "Maya, what's happened?" I showed her the petition. She read it carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is vicious," she said finally. "He's taken every sacrifice you've made for your mother and twisted it into evidence against you. Eleanor, what if I lose? What if they take Mom away from me?" Eleanor sat down across from me and looked me directly in the eyes. "Maya, do you remember what I told you about my sister trying to have me declared incompetent?" "Yes." "Do you know what the most important lesson was from that experience?" I shook my head. "I learned that you can't control what other people do to you, but you can control how you respond to it. And I learned that sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up revealing their own true character in the process." Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor helped me prepare for the hearing in ways that went far beyond just organizing documents. She helped me prepare emotionally and mentally for what was going to be the fight of my life. "Maya, your brother is counting on you to behave the way you've always behaved, to be passive, to try to keep the peace, to doubt yourself when he attacks you. But that's not who you are anymore." She was right. The woman who had discovered those legal documents in Mom's bedroom and confronted Marcus in my kitchen was not the same woman who had spent her life giving up everything to avoid conflict. Sarah Martinez prepared me for the specific legal aspects of the hearing. "Maya, the judge is going to want to see evidence that your mother is receiving appropriate care and that she's not being harmed or endangered in any way, but they're also going to want to see that you're stable and capable of continuing to provide that care. What if Marcus has convinced people that I'm not stable? Then we show them who you really are. We show them your work history, your dedication, your mother's actual condition, and the professional assessments that support the excellent care you've been providing." The day of the hearing, I put on my best dress and tried to project confidence I didn't entirely feel. Eleanor came with me for moral support, and Dr. Williams had agreed to testify on my behalf. Marcus was already in the courtroom when we arrived, and he wasn't alone. He had Linda with him, and to my shock, he also had Aunt Patricia and cousin Jennifer. My heart sank. He had convinced our own family members to testify against me. The hearing began with Marcus's attorney presenting his case. It was everything I had expected and worse. They painted me as an unstable woman who had given up her career because she couldn't handle the demands of work, who had isolated our mother from family, and who was providing inadequate care due to financial and emotional stress. Aunt Patricia testified that she had been concerned about Mom's care based on conversations with Marcus, and that she thought Mom might be happier and safer in a professional care facility. Jennifer testified that she had tried to visit Mom but that I had discouraged family visits and seemed overwhelmed and defensive when people asked about Mom's condition. Even Linda testified, saying that Marcus had expressed worry about his mother's situation and that she had observed how stressed and emotional I seemed during phone conversations. By the time they finished presenting their case, I felt like I had been eviscerated. They had taken every private struggle I'd shared with family, every moment of exhaustion or frustration I'd expressed, and used it as evidence that I was unfit to care for Mom. But then it was our turn. Sarah Martinez began by calling Dr. Williams to testify. "Dr. Williams, in your professional opinion, what is the quality of care that Mrs. Ruth Johnson has been receiving in her daughter's home?" The quality of care has been exceptional. Mrs. Johnson's physical health has remained stable. Her medications are properly managed, and her cognitive function has been maintained at the highest level possible given her condition. The level of attention and care she receives at home far exceeds what would be available in most institutional settings. Have you observed any signs of neglect, abuse, or inadequate care? Absolutely not. Maya Johnson has been one of the most dedicated and competent family caregivers I've worked with in my 25 years of practice. In your opinion, would Mrs. Johnson benefit from being removed from her daughter's care and placed in an institutional setting? Not only would she not benefit, but I believe such a move would be detrimental to her well-being. Patients with dementia typically do best in familiar environments with consistent caregivers who know their needs and preferences intimately. Next, Sarah called Eleanor as a witness. Mrs. Washington, you live next door to Maya and Ruth Johnson. What have you observed about the care Ruth receives? I have observed extraordinary devotion and excellent care. Maya has sacrificed her own career and personal life to provide around-the-clock care for her mother. Ruth is well fed, properly medicated, mentally stimulated, and most importantly, she's happy and comfortable in her own home. Have you observed any concerning behavior from Maya Johnson? The only concerning behavior I've observed is how much she sacrifices for others without taking care of herself, but her dedication to her mother's well-being is absolute. Then Sarah called me to testify on my own behalf. Maya, why did you reduce your work hours to care for your mother? Because my mother needed more care than she could safely receive while I was working full-time. I made the decision to prioritize her needs over my career, because I wanted to ensure she received the best possible care in the comfort of her own home. Have you ever prevented family members from visiting or contacting your mother? Never. My mother's phone is beside her bed, and she receives calls regularly. I've invited family members to visit multiple times, including during this proceeding. Why do you believe your mother should remain in your care? I took a deep breath and looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, my mother has dementia, but she's not incompetent. She knows where she is, she knows who I am, and she's expressed repeatedly that she wants to stay in her own home. I've provided her with excellent medical care, a safe living environment, and most importantly, the security of being cared for by someone who loves her unconditionally. I've never asked my family for financial help. I've never asked them to sacrifice their lives or careers to help with her care. I've handled this responsibility completely on my own because I believe it's the right thing to do. My brother lives across the country and has visited my mother exactly 0 times in the 3 years since her diagnosis. He's never provided any hands-on care, never helped with medical appointments, never spent a single night worrying about her safety or well-being. But he wants to take control of her care now, when the hard work is done and when there are financial assets involved. I paused and looked directly at Marcus. Your Honor, this isn't about my mother's well-being. If it were, my brother would have been involved in her care from the beginning. This is about control, and it's about money, and my mother deserves better than to be treated like an asset, to be managed rather than a person to be loved. The judge asked me several more questions about Mom's daily care, my financial situation, and my plans for her continued care as her condition potentially worsened. Then the judge called a recess to review the evidence and testimony. During the break, Marcus approached me in the hallway. Maya, it's not too late to work this out reasonably. I'm not trying to hurt you or Mom, I'm just trying to do what's best for everyone. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and felt something I had never felt before: complete emotional detachment. Marcus, you spent months systematically destroying my reputation with our family. You filed false reports with government agencies. You tried to turn our own mother against me with manipulative questioning. And now you're asking a judge to take away the person I love most in the world. I did what I thought was necessary. No, I interrupted. You did what you thought would get you what you wanted. And the saddest part is, if you had just asked me to help you plan for Mom's future care, if you had offered to actually participate in her care, instead of just trying to control it, I would have worked with you. But that's not what this is about, is it? This is about you wanting control of Mom's assets without having to do any of the actual work of caring for her. Marcus's face hardened. Maya, you always think you're so noble, so self-sacrificing, but maybe the reason you never got married, never had your own family, never built your own life is because you're afraid to. Maybe taking care of Mom is just an excuse to avoid taking risks and living your own life. His words were designed to hurt, and they did, but they also clarified something for me. You know what, Marcus? You might be right. Maybe I have used caregiving as a way to avoid some of the scary parts of life. But at least I've been here. At least I've shown up. At least when someone I love needed me, I didn't calculate what was in it for me before deciding whether to help. When the judge returned, I could tell from her expression that she had made her decision. After reviewing all the testimony and evidence presented, I find that there is insufficient evidence to support the petitioner's claim that Mrs. Ruth Johnson is receiving inadequate care or that her current caregiver is unfit. My knees almost gave out with relief. The medical testimony clearly indicates that Mrs. Johnson is receiving excellent care in her current situation. While family caregiving can be challenging and stressful, the evidence shows that the respondent has been meeting that challenge successfully. Furthermore, Mrs. Johnson has not been shown to be incompetent to express her own preferences about her care, and she has clearly indicated her desire to remain in her current living situation. The petition for guardianship is denied. Marcus's face went white. I saw him lean over to whisper something angrily to his attorney. As we left the courthouse, Eleanor hugged me tightly. Maya, you did it. You stood up for yourself and your mother, and you won. But the victory felt bittersweet. Yes, I had protected Mom and myself from Marcus's manipulation. But I had also lost my brother, or rather, I had finally accepted that the brother I thought I had never really existed. That night, as I sat with Mom and helped her get ready for bed, she looked at me with one of her moments of perfect clarity. Maya, honey, you look sad. Did something happen today? I thought about how to explain the day's events in a way that wouldn't upset her. Mom, I had to make some difficult decisions about our family. But you're safe, and you're staying right here with me, and that's what matters. She patted my hand. You're a good daughter, Maya. You always have been. I hope you know that. As I tucked her into bed that night, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly proud of myself. Not because I had sacrificed for others, not because I had kept the peace, not because I had been good. I felt proud because I had fought for what was right, even when it was hard. I had told the truth, even when it meant losing relationships I had treasured. I had stood up to manipulation and control, even when it meant accepting that someone I loved didn't really love me back. But most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by what I could give to other people or how much I was willing to sacrifice. My worth came from who I was, not what I did for others, and that realization was going to change everything about how I lived the rest of my life. 2 years have passed since that day in the courthouse, and I'm writing this story from a place I never expected to find myself: genuine peace. Mom's condition has declined somewhat, as we knew it would. She has more confused days now, and she needs more physical assistance with daily activities. But she's still in her own home, still surrounded by familiar things and people who love her, still getting the kind of individualized care that no institution could provide. And I'm still here with her, but not in the same way I was before. The first change came about 3 months after the court hearing. Eleanor suggested something that initially made me uncomfortable. Maya, you need to start building a support system that doesn't revolve around crisis management. What do you mean? I mean you need to start thinking about what your life looks like beyond caregiving. Not instead of caregiving, but in addition to it. She was right, but I didn't know how to begin. For so long, my entire identity had been wrapped up in taking care of others and sacrificing for family. I didn't know who I was outside of that role. Eleanor, with her background as an educator, had a practical suggestion. Maya, there are other people going through what you went through. People dealing with family members who manipulate and betray them. Have you ever thought about sharing your experience to help others? That conversation led to something I never could have imagined. I started a support group for people dealing with family betrayal and manipulation. It began small, just 3 other women who had responded to a notice I posted at the community center. But within 6 months, we had 12 regular members, and people were driving from neighboring towns to attend our meetings. I discovered that family betrayal is far more common than I had ever realized. There was Sarah, whose sister had tried to have her declared incompetent to steal her inheritance. There was Maria, whose adult children had isolated her from friends and family while systematically draining her savings. There was Linda, whose brother had convinced their entire extended family that she was mentally unstable in order to gain control of their father's care. Each story was different, but the patterns were the same: manipulation, gaslighting, the weaponizing of love and family loyalty, and the systematic destruction of someone's reputation and relationships. But more importantly, each person in our group was finding their way back to their own strength and self-worth. Maya, Sarah said during one of our meetings, you taught me that I don't have to choose between loving my family and protecting myself. I can love my sister and still refuse to let her hurt me. That support group taught me something profound. Helping others wasn't about sacrificing myself or giving up everything I wanted. It was about sharing strength, wisdom, and hope with people who needed it. For the first time in my life, I was helping people from a place of empowerment rather than from a place of self-denial. The second major change came when I met David. David was a widower whose wife had died of early onset dementia 3 years earlier. He had been caring for her at home, much as I was caring for Mom, and he started attending our support group because his adult stepchildren had questioned his decisions about her care and his handling of her estate. David was different from any man I had ever met. He was kind and gentle, but he was also strong in a way that didn't require anyone else to be weak. He had fought for his wife's dignity and comfort during her illness, not because he was a martyr, but because he loved her and believed it was the right thing to do. Maya, he said one evening as we walked around the park near the community center after a support group meeting. I want you to know that I think what you did for your mother and what you survived with your brother was incredibly brave. I don't feel brave. Most of the time I feel like I was just too stubborn to give up. Sometimes that's what bravery is, he said. Not feeling fearless, just refusing to let fear make your decisions for you. David and I took our time getting to know each other. We had both learned that relationships built on neediness or rescue fantasies don't work. But relationships built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection, those can be beautiful. We've been together for over a year now, and he's taught me something I never learned in all my previous relationships. Love doesn't require you to disappear. In healthy relationships, you become more yourself, not less. David helps with Mom's care sometimes, but not because I need rescuing or because I can't handle it alone. He helps because he cares about both of us, and because he knows that practical support is one way to show love. More importantly, he's helped me understand that I can be a devoted daughter and caregiver, while also being a woman with her own dreams, needs, and desires. The third change was perhaps the most surprising. Some of my family relationships healed, while others ended completely. Aunt Patricia called me about 6 months after the court hearing. Maya, I owe you an apology, a big one. Aunt Patricia, you don't. Yes, I do. I let Marcus manipulate me into believing things about you that weren't true. I should have come to see the situation for myself instead of taking someone else's word for it. Why are you calling now? Because Marcus called me last month, asking if I would help him contest your mother's will. He wanted me to say that Ruth wasn't mentally competent when she made her will, and that you had unduly influenced her. My stomach dropped. Even after losing the guardianship case, Marcus was still scheming. What did you tell him? I told him that I had seen your mother recently, that she seemed perfectly clear about her wishes, and that if he wanted to challenge her will, he'd have to do it without my help. And Maya, I also told him that I was ashamed of how I had treated you during the guardianship proceedings. Aunt Patricia and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, but genuinely. She started visiting Mom regularly, and she became one of the strongest supporters of our support group. Cousin Jennifer also reached out to apologize and to reconnect. She admitted that Marcus had painted a very different picture of the situation than what she observed when she finally came to visit. But Marcus himself. I haven't spoken to him since the day of the hearing. He made a few more attempts to interfere with Mom's care, contacting her doctor, trying to get information from her bank, even attempting to report me to Adult Protective Services again. But each time, the professionals involved recognized his behavior for what it was, harassment by someone who had no legitimate role in Mom's care. Eventually, he stopped. I don't know if he finally accepted that he couldn't control the situation, or if he simply moved on to other schemes. I do know that I stopped caring about his motivations or his approval. That indifference was perhaps the greatest gift of this entire experience, learning that I don't need the love or approval of people who are willing to hurt me to get what they want. The fourth change was in how I think about my own future. For the first time in my adult life, I'm making plans that aren't entirely centered around taking care of someone else. Mom's care will always be my priority as long as she needs me, but I'm also thinking about what comes next. David and I have talked about traveling together someday, maybe taking some classes, possibly even writing a book about family caregiving and dealing with manipulation and betrayal. I've also returned to work part-time time at the hospital. Not because I need the money. Mom's estate planning attorney helped us set up a proper care arrangement that protects her assets while ensuring she gets excellent care. But because I missed using my nursing skills and being part of a professional community. Most surprisingly, I've been approached about running for the town council. Apparently, my experience advocating for myself and Mom, combined with my work with the support group, has given me a reputation as someone who stands up for vulnerable people and doesn't back down from difficult fights. I'm considering it. The Maya who spent her whole life avoiding conflict and keeping peace at any cost would never have considered running for public office. But the Maya I am now. She's interested in being part of solutions to community problems. Today is the 2-year anniversary of the court hearing, and I'm spending it the way I spend most of my good days at home with Mom, with Eleanor coming by for coffee, and with David joining us for dinner later. Mom is having one of her clear days. She doesn't remember the specifics of what happened with Marcus, but she seems to understand that something changed in our family dynamic, and that she's safe and loved where she is. Maya. She said this morning as I was helping her with her medications, "I want you to know how proud I am of you." Proud of me for what, Mom? For becoming the woman I always hoped you would become. Strong and kind, but not afraid to fight for what's right. I think she understands more than I sometimes give her credit for. As I write this, I'm thinking about all the people who might read this story and see themselves in it. Maybe you're the daughter who has given up everything to care for aging parents, while your siblings live their lives and criticize your choices from a distance. Maybe you're the son who is being manipulated by family members who want to control your decisions. Maybe you're someone whose love and loyalty are being used against you by people who should protect you. If that's you, I want you to know this: you are not responsible for other people's choices, even when those people are family. You are not required to sacrifice your well-being, your integrity, or your peace of mind to keep toxic people comfortable. And you are not selfish for protecting yourself from people who would hurt you to get what they want. I also want you to know that it's possible to set boundaries with family while still being a loving, caring person. It's possible to say no to manipulation while still saying yes to genuine relationship. And it's possible to build a life based on your own values rather than other people's expectations. Most importantly, I want you to know that you don't have to choose between being alone and being mistreated. There are people in this world who will love you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. There are people who will support your strength rather than exploit your kindness. Eleanor taught me that family isn't just about blood, it's about people who choose to love you, support you, and want what's best for you. My chosen family now includes Eleanor, David, the women in my support group, the colleagues who respect my professional skills, and the community members who trust my judgment. It also still includes Mom, Aunt Patricia, Jennifer, and a few other relatives who chose to see the truth rather than believe convenient lies. But it doesn't include Marcus. And for the first time in my life, that doesn't make me sad, it makes me free. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up in my own home, with the person I love most in the world safe and comfortable in the next room. I'm going to have coffee with my neighbor and friend Eleanor. I'm going to spend time with David, who loves me exactly as I am. I'm going to do meaningful work that uses my skills and helps other people. And I'm going to do all of this knowing that I fought for it, that I chose it, and that I deserve it. Not because of what I've sacrificed or what I've given up for others, but because of who I am and what I've chosen to become. That, I've learned, is what real peace feels like. And it's worth fighting for. Epilogue: 6 months after I finished writing this story, Mom passed away peacefully in her sleep, in her own bed, holding my hand. She had been failing for several weeks, but she was alert and comfortable right until the end. David was there, and Eleanor was there, and Dr. Williams stopped by that evening to make sure Mom wasn't in any pain. In her final weeks, Mom had several moments of complete clarity where she thanked me for keeping her home, for fighting for her dignity, and for not letting anyone take her away from the life she loved. "You did right by me, Maya," she whispered the night before she died, "and you did right by yourself. I'm proud of the woman you became." Marcus didn't come to the funeral. He sent flowers and a card expressing sympathy, but he didn't come. That would have devastated me once. Now, it just seemed fitting. He had chosen not to be part of Mom's life when she was alive, so his absence at her death felt consistent. The people who did come: Eleanor, David, Aunt Patricia, Jennifer, Dr. Williams, the women from my support group, my colleagues from the hospital. They came because they had been part of our real life, our chosen family, our community of love and support. Mom left me the house and most of her savings. She also left a small inheritance to Marcus, along with a letter I'll never see the contents of. I hope it told him she loved him, but that she was disappointed in the choices he made. I'm still living in Mom's house, our house. David and I have talked about marriage, but we're in no hurry. We've both learned that good relationships develop naturally when they're based on genuine compatibility, rather than neediness or convenience. The support group continues to meet, and it's grown into something that serves our entire community. We've helped dozens of people recognize manipulation, set healthy boundaries, and rebuild their lives after family betrayal. I did run for town council, and I won. Turns out that people appreciate representatives who are willing to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the years I spent caring for Mom, if I wish I had lived differently or made different choices. The answer is no. I don't regret caring for Mom. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to give back to the woman who gave me life and love. But I also don't regret fighting back when my brother tried to destroy that relationship for his own gain. I don't regret standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and choosing to build a life based on truth rather than manipulation. Most of all, I don't regret learning that my worth doesn't depend on how much I'm willing to sacrifice for people who don't appreciate it. I've learned that real love, the kind worth having, doesn't require you to disappear. It requires you to show up as your authentic self and to choose people who can love that person. And I've learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. Peace is knowing that you're living according to your values, that you're surrounded by people who truly care about your well-being, and that you have the strength to protect what matters most. That's the life I'm living now. That's the peace I found on the other side of the storm. And it was worth every difficult moment it took to get here.